has chosen to do history, and all of you know about the Second World War and have just recently learned about the Holocaust. And we're very lucky today to have Mr. Bob Kutner to speak to you. This is going to be his last lecture, his last talk, so you really are very privileged to hear him. And he was in the very unfortunate position of being Jewish in Europe at the time of the Nazis. And he's going to tell you his story. So I'm sure he'll give you opportunities to ask questions. If somebody wants to ask while he's speaking, put your hand up, but certainly be time at the end. So it really is a great privilege to introduce Mr. Bob Kutner.
Good morning. I'd like you to visualize London's Liverpool Street Station in April 1939 on a very cold, foggy, frosty, miserable day. And there's this boy about 15 year ages, standing on the platform, lost, lonely, hungry, doesn't speak a word of English, and he's got no one to talk to. He's got no money, no means of communication, and there he stands. And he's standing like that alone because his arrival in Britain was 24 hours late. I come back to that. I was born in Germany of Polish Jewish parents. The parents were refugees from Poland in their turn. They came to live in Germany. They settled there quite well. And my brother, sister, and I were brought up in a normal way. Everything was fine. Until this black cloud, what was called Adolf Hitler, started forming over Germany. Jewish kids in school found life intolerable. I was 9, 10 years old. The teachers, from being nice, gentle, kind people, suddenly turned into ogres. They had been taught how to teach Hitler style. And Hitler style was that Hitler made the grass grow, he made the sun shine, he made the rivers flow. Whatever good came from anywhere was created by Hitler, not by God, not by any other being, by Hitler. It meant that teachers took the same attitude, and Jewish kids were very severely persecuted, badly treated. I was 9 or 10, my brother and sister were older, but we found school had changed overnight from being a pleasant place you went to. Suddenly it was a case of, you Jew, you sit over there, we don't want you in the class, we don't need you, you're stupid, you're this, that, and the other. And life became terrible. At the same time, it became equally terrible for our parents. Hitler had finally come to power, he had the power, and he used it on persecuting the Jews. And that seemed to be his main pursuit at the beginning, persecute the Jews. And that meant having old Jewish men with beards cleaning gutters by hand. It meant humiliating, ill-treating, and beating up old people, particularly Jewish people, and giving them a very, very hard time. That was also the time in 33, 34, when they started experimenting with concentration camps. They weren't the ones you read about, like Auschwitz or Belsen. They weren't so sophisticated. They just experimented on human beings. They used to hang them up overnight, like over branches of trees or things like that, so that they could suffer and die hanging from tree branches. That was learning how to run. By the way, can you hear me all right? Yes? Is it quite clear? So this got more and more sophisticated with the concentration camps. At the same time, the Jews living in Germany had to make a decision as to what they were going to do with themselves, because it was clear that they were not going to be allowed to live in peace. So there were two groups of Jews. There were the German Jews who thought themselves rather superior because they'd been born in Germany. They had served in the German army in the First World War. They'd got their Iron Crosses and their decorations, and they thought Hitler would never, ever touch them. And then there were the refugees like us, the Pupils, Eastern European Jews, who were never popular at the best of times, and we had to decide what to do with our lives. And my parents decided to leave Germany as soon as they could and migrate to France. Because by that time, I mean, for me to go to school was risky at all times. I started getting beaten up in the streets by big bullies. If my brother didn't defend me, there was no defense. So the school was terrifying. The teachers were evil, the kids were evil, the schools were evil. I can't describe it worse than that. Anyway, my parents decided to emigrate from Germany, where things were getting progressively worse, and they moved to France, to a little town just inside France called Lunéville. You know, I swear I can still remember horse-drawn tramcars. I don't know, it's true. I've got this image of tramcars drawn by horses. Anyway, that was then, in those days. And we settled in Lunéville. It was lovely. I had to go to school again. I had to start from the bottom again. And I learned French fairly easily. I found the language spoke to me quite easily. So we lived in Lunéville, and it was great. Lovely life. And then, unfortunately, my father's business went broke. My father's businesses always went broke. He was very good at ruining his business, and that was one of them. So we had to move from Lunéville to Paris. And Paris in those days was about as bad as Hitler's Germany. The French didn't want Jews, they didn't want immigrants, they didn't want people they had to perhaps support. And they made life very, very difficult for the Jewish refugees. If the Jewish refugees weren't taken care of by refugee organizations, they starved. And my father couldn't get a labor permit, couldn't get permission to work, couldn't do anything, so we nearly starved. And we were put in a kind of a charity hotel. Do any of you speak French? Learn any French? Because, well, the place we stayed in was in a street called the Rue de l'Espérance, the Street of Hope, and the building, which was a converted hotel, like flea pit, was called the Hotel de l'Espérance, the Hotel of Hope. It was exactly the opposite. It was awful. It was a flea pit. At night, you used to come into your room, and when you switched on the lights disappeared, and sheets were covered in lice. But then they disappeared because the lice don't like the electric light. But next morning, when you got up, the sheets were covered with blood stains all over from the squashed lice. My mother, being the proud lady she was, didn't want our neighbors to know that we had no food to cook. She used to put a kettle on and hoped that the steam would deceive people next door into thinking that she was cooking. That's how bad it was. We had, for the five of us, we had a kitchen and a bedroom, and that was it. No food, or very little food, no decent accommodation, and life was very, very difficult. I was improving my French in the meantime, and so then I was sent by some charity organization to live in Switzerland for a while, where I had to start school all over again. And but life was good. The people were kind to me, and I stayed there for a wee while. Then I had to go back to Paris, and I might tell you, I had to go to school in Paris, and I hated it. I didn't like the teacher; he didn't like me either, and it was a miserable life. So some charity or other sent me to Switzerland for a few months. And I said life was lovely, lots of food, nice treatment, and then back to Paris. But then I was sent back to Switzerland again, yes. And while I was in Switzerland, I got word that my parents had left France and moved to Italy, Milan in Italy, and they were settling down there again. And I was told to go and join them in Milan. And I must tell you, Milan, Italy, in those days was wonderful. The people were wonderful, life was wonderful. I started going to school again. I had to start from bottom again, learn Italian this time. I was lucky with languages. They weren't too hard for me to learn. So I went to school there, the teachers were lovely, and life was great until a man called Mussolini came to power in Italy. Now Mussolini was the fascist counterpart of Hitler in Germany. And he and Hitler formed an alliance, which included on the one side Austria and Germany, and across the Alps on the other side Italy. And they all equally engaged in the persecution of the Jews. It was a national sport. Going back to Germany, things were getting worse and worse and worse. Ill treatment was getting worse. And Mussolini took a leaf out of Hitler's book and started the same kind of ill treatment, as I said. And then in 1938, Hitler told Mussolini, who was always at his beck and call, he said to him, "You've got to start initiating this anti-Jewish, this anti-Semitic propaganda, ill treatment." So Mussolini did as he was told, and kids like me were thrown out of school, weren't allowed to take a job, weren't allowed to do anything except sit at home and starve. The same applied to my sister. I'll tell you about my brother in a few minutes. So life was pretty terrible. The Italian people, until then, had been wonderful, suddenly turned into the same kind of rave as the Germans had. Very dangerous, very frightening, and we were given 6 months to leave Italy without chattels. But we had nowhere to go. The Jews in those days had nowhere to go. All the countries all around were closed to Jews. Imagine if you can visualize Italy's geography. Milan, where we lived, is near the top of the country. And so one side was France. The French wouldn't even let us travel through for 24 hours to get whatever destination we wanted to reach. Obviously, Germany and Austria were above us. We couldn't go through there. We couldn't go through Switzerland on the other side, because the Swiss actually were very good at giving us back to the Germans in the quarters, straight to concentration camps. The camps were developing in Germany at a hell of a rate. By that time, they were doing wholesale business. They were locking up hundreds and thousands of people. We hadn't quite got to the Bells and the Auschwitz stage yet, but they were getting there. People were getting locked up for no reason. Families were torn apart. And that is what Hitler had demanded of Mussolini as well. So here we were, stuck in Italy and nowhere to go. And we had to be out in 6 months or else be in prison. Well, there was no way of doing it because, by the way, we all of us, saw the ultimate destination, either Britain, England, or, we either wanted to come to live in England or live in Palestine as it was then. But we couldn't get there because there wasn't a country in Europe that was let us even travel through to get to our destination. So most of us actually lived in fear because we all thought we'd wind up in jail or in camps, all of us, and there was nowhere to go. At the same time, my brother, who was about 18 years old at that time, felt he had to get out of Italy. So he went illegally over the mountains from Italy into France. He had a guide at night. It was a very dangerous thing to do. And when he got into France, he volunteered for the French army. And on that condition, he accepted it. They let him stay in France. But then, and this is a slightly misty thing in my memory, he was approached by the French army and offered a job as a kind of a spy for the French. Because by then, of course, he was French, Italian, and German, as we all did. And they thought they could use him for this spying business. And because he was young and stupid and big-headed, and was only interested in one thing, that was the girls. He was very handsome, he was quite successful. Because that's what he wanted from life, so he joined up with the French Secret Service. And the French sent him back to Italy to do his stuff. His stuff. What was he supposed to do? He was supposed to count the strength of the Italian military aircraft stationed around Milan in northern Italy. In other words, he had to go around the airports counting aircraft. And that's what he did. He went around aircraft, on the airports, on a bike, counting planes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They were ridiculous. And because he felt things were too busy for him, he roped me in as well. Now, by that time I was 14, 15. And I became an assistant spy, a trainee spy. So we had 2 bikes then. He used to ride in front of me like Don Quixote, and I was his Sancho Panza behind him, riding behind on bikes. And we still counted. 1, 2, 3. Can you imagine? Enid Blyton would have been ashamed of a plot like that. But there we were, really spies and in trouble. And all the time, Mussolini was knocking on our door, and all the time we had to get out of the country. Very difficult. My brother, unfortunately, got caught, as was inevitable. He had to get caught. He was an idiot. All he was interested in, he had girlfriends helping him as well, and me. And what he also did, he made me keep records of when he had to report back to his French bosses. He used to write in invisible ink. I don't know if you know how you do that. You squeeze a lemon, and lemon juice, you dip your pen in lemon juice, and when you warm the paper from underneath, the letters come through. And that's how we used to write in invisible ink to France. Anyway, we were caught at all ends. I mean, we had no chance of getting away. And my brother, the idiot, stored all kinds of documents, copies of the reports he'd written to France, he kept in the cupboard at home. So when the police eventually caught up with him, the Italian equivalent of the Gestapo, you probably heard of the Gestapo, the secret police, when the Italians caught up with him, they put him in jail, and me, and my mother. And by my sister had gone away to Britain on an exceptional domestic service scheme, and the rest of us were stuck. My mother and I were taken away and interrogated. I tell you something, being interrogated by the Italian secret police was no joke. Your age. I was terrified, out of my mind. But eventually they released me and sequestrated my passport, which, by the way, was a Polish passport because my parents had migrated from Poland. So I was, minus passport, I was released. Now I had to try and get out of Italy, but again, there was nowhere to go. And I got an illegal job. I mean, I wasn't supposed to work, but I got a job in a kind of organization with Jewish refugees. They took care of people who needed help. And I was an errand boy, filing clerk, whatever you like to call it. No computers then. And while I was there, there was this Jewish couple with a little daughter of about 9 who came up every day because they had been promised that an English couple were coming to our committee room to take this young girl back to England. The girl was 9, waiting for help, but the English couple were going to take her, but it didn't turn out. It was desperate. I remember seeing the parents there every day, hoping against hope that this couple would turn up, and they didn't. It was dreadful, I mean, terrifying. So eventually, as far as I know, the parents and the child went over the mountains like my brother had done, with a guide at night into France illegally. Whether they survived, whether that child survived, I will never know. What I do know is that that English couple, by the way, I keep saying English, but the Scots didn't exist then. It was the English. It was always English. They didn't talk about the Scots. They talked about English. Anyway, this English couple turned up a day or two after that little girl disappeared. And in their wisdom, they decided to take me, which probably was the worst mistake they ever made. I wouldn't have taken me. I know what I was like. But they said, okay, we'll take you home, but to Britain. But then, I had no passport because the Italians sequestrated it. But I'm cutting the story short because they weren't forever. So eventually, with the very powerful help of that English, very wealthy businessman, I got some sort of an affidavit, a document that opened doors to me instead of passport. And so he and I went to France, to go through France to come to Britain. But when we got to the French border, they took me off the train, they said my documents were not in order, and they shoved me in jail. So at that age of 15, I spent 2 nights in an Italian prison, which was not funny. At the same time, things were progressing in Germany, if that's the word. The savagery got worse and worse and worse. The concentration camps got worse and worse. Mass killing of people became a highly specialized field. Parents, children, all taken into those camps and literally killed off. And so the Jews left in Germany had to try and make moves to get out of there at the same time. So on the one side there was Hitler with his Jewish children, the ones who were surviving. On the other side there was Mussolini with his Jewish children who were surviving. So the two of them got together and continued their cruelty. In 1938, a young student called Greenspan, a Jewish boy, decided that the Germans were treating the Jews too badly, and he decided to do something about it. He went to Paris to the French legation, the German legation in Paris, and killed a 3rd-class diplomat. He shot him dead, which is perfectly true. He did shoot him dead. But the Germans went hysterical. And Mussolini and Hitler and Goebbels was Hitler's second in command. They decided that German people should run free, do what they wanted to do, get rid of the Jews, beat them up, destroy their buildings, just get rid of them. And in 1938, autumn 1938, the German people went, and I'm not exaggerating this, they went on the rampage. Thousands and thousands and thousands of them broke into the streets, either in their Nazi uniforms, which were brown shirted uniforms, or in civilian clothes so they wouldn't be identified. And they went out and killed Jews. They killed them and killed them. And they smashed their homes, and they smashed their buildings, and they smashed their shops, and they smashed their synagogues, the houses of prayer. And they went crazy. 30,000 men were taken away from their homes, from their wives and their children, put into camps, concentration camps. And it was one of the worst nights of horror in the history of mankind. And that night has ever since then been known as Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, because everything inside was smashed. A great discredit to the German people. And that's when the emigration of Jews out of Germany had its final impetus. They all tried to get out, and they had to get out because there was no other way of surviving. So this happened in Germany, while the same sort of thing happened to us in Italy. But we all had to try and get out, we all had to suffer, and it was awful. If you can imagine too, Hitler's troops, his volunteer army, used to wear brown shirts, joggers like riding breeches, and march through the streets with their famous Hitler salute and arms extended, and sing the most vile, obscene, anti-Jewish songs you've ever heard. I'll try and translate one for you. It went something like, when Jewish blood sprays off our knives, life will be twice as good. Think about it. These are people, cultured, civilized people, with years and years and years of culture and civilization behind them. That's how the other thing they did was, in 1936, I think it was, they decided to deprive the Jews of the right to live, to trade, to practice law or whatever they did. And if you had a Jewish mother, a Jewish grandmother, a Jewish great-grandmother, you were a Jew, no matter what the other side of your family were. In other words, your descent was always predicated on the sex of your ancestors. That meant suddenly, in 1936 or 37, you weren't allowed to work, you weren't allowed to do anything. Again, you could starve or be persecuted. Excuse me. Try and picture these families being destroyed at the whim of a man who was crazy. I mean, he was crazy, there's no doubt about it. There was actually a very major organization, which I won't go into now, which you know about, the Kinder Transport. An organization was set up whereby thousands of Jewish children were allowed out of Germany, mainly into Britain, and they came to live without their parents, with strange families, a very difficult life for them to lead. In the way from Italy, some of us had been allowed to do the same thing. But me, well, I was in trouble. I was in jail. My papers were allegedly out of order, and my English sponsor had to go back to Britain, so I was alone. My brother in jail, of course, because he'd been arrested for the spying bit. Eventually, they let me out of jail. I went back to Milan, my home, and then I decided I had to get out of Mussolini's Italy. Mussolini, if you haven't seen pictures of him, he was a fat bullfrog of a man, short, fat, bald-headed. His two interests in life were politics, hating the Jews, and loving women. He had more mistresses than the Shah of Persia. Anyway, he was an evil, brutal villain, and he continued organizing our pursuit. I tried to make another effort to get out of Italy, and eventually I got my passport back. I don't remember, my mother, I think, bribed somebody. I got my passport back, and then my English sponsor said, look, you've got a passport now. You make your own way to England, and I'll take care of you. The only trouble is, to get to England, I had to go through France. No go, because he wasn't letting me to sponsor me anymore. Through Germany, obviously no go. Through Switzerland, no go. So in the end, I took it into my hands. At the age of 15, I went to the German consulate in Milan, the Germans. And I said, with my Polish passport in hand, remember that's very important, my Polish passport in hand, I said, I would like to travel to England and have to go through Germany. And the guy said, certainly, young man, would you like to visit our lovely country? And let me explain that the Polish passports just said I was Polish. The German Jewish passport had a great big J stamp in it. Once you had that J in it, you had no chance. You went to jail, concentration camp, wherever. But I had this Polish passport which cleared my way through Germany. So I went. I left my mother behind, and I set out for Britain, this time over the Brenner Pass into Germany, Austria, Germany, eventually Holland and England. But when I got to the Italian border, they took me off the train again. They said my papers weren't in order, they put me in jail again. Again, I wasn't much riper than you, and I was spitless, terrified. I mean, you can't imagine, you're on cops, the Italian secret police, take you to drink, shove you in a cell, don't worry about food. Oh yeah, sorry, I had a few lira left and they went and bought me sandwiches with my money. They kept me fed. I spent another night in jail in Italy on the border and eventually I was released, complete with Polish passport, and set out for Britain. Going into Germany was the most amazing experience. They were lovely. Nobody knew I was Jewish, of course, but my railway compartment was, there was a stout German gentleman with a swastika badge on his lapel, and he was nice to me, fed me sandwiches. And I eventually came to Britain via a complicated route and found myself in London's Liverpool Street Station in April 1939 on my own, very hungry, very scared. Not a word of English, and no one to meet me because I was 24 hours late. The Italian holder had kept me back for 24 hours, and my English sponsor wasn't there. There was no one there. So I wandered up and down the platform. Not a word of English, not a penny, no contacts. And if I tell you I was scared again, you believe me. So there were some sort of charity organizations wandering up and down with armbands on, and one would pick me up and said, "We take care of you tonight," and they put me in a kind of a shelter, an awful place. By the next morning, Mr. Reigate's chauffeur turned up, his chauffeur. I want to tell you, I'd never been in a car with my chauffeur, and this guy with livery, beard, with a chauffeur's cap on, he came, when I came out of the building where the shelter was, he doffed his cap for me. Well, I thought that was a paradise. But incredible, me, this wee refugee from Italy and Germany, and from Hitler, and from the horrors. There I was being met by a chauffeur in a limousine. I'd never been in a car properly, as I said. He drove me to Mr. Reigate's business, and from there Mr. Reigate drove me to his very, very luxurious home in Hampstead, in London. I've got to go back into what happened in Germany. The slaughter was incredible. The camps by then were very, very active. The Jews hadn't got out of Germany when total constant danger of being put in those camps, which were by then more and more sophisticated. And as the war progressed, and the war was about to break out, as the war progressed, of course, the Germans made it into a refined hobby to persecute the Jews and put them in camps. And again, the older Jews got taken first because they were useless anyway. They were starved and beaten to death and put into camps. And you've heard of Auschwitz and all those camps. People were killed in their hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands for no reason except they were Jewish. No other reason. The women and the men were shoved in the cattle trucks by standing up because there was no room to sit down. There was no room to do anything. There was no room for toilet use. There was nothing. No food, no water, just pure sheer ill-treatment. And those cattle trucks took them to camps like Belsen and Auschwitz and others. And there the people were offloaded, thrown off, I should have said, except the ones who were lying dead in the carriages. And quite a few were dying on these train journeys to the camp. They were offloaded and put into huts, that's what they called them. And then they were beaten up and starved some more. And they were given labor to do. If they did labor in the camps, then they were taken outside the camps and made to work in factories nearby doing German wartime production. If they couldn't keep up with the work, they were allowed to die. There was a commandant of a major concentration camp whose wife enjoyed her own little cruelties. And one of the hobbies she had was to make, this is true, to make lampshades out of human skins. That's what some of the Nazi people, lampshades out of human skins. And if that didn't happen, then she used to set her dogs on them. They used to come back from 12 hours labor, sweated labor, in those quarries or wherever they were. And when they came back, she set her dogs on them. Or she peeled them, whichever way you want to look at it. Her name has gone down in history. There were two of them actually. One was Irma Gresen, and the other one was Ilse Koch. They were both wives of camp commandants. One was Auschwitz, I think the other one was Belsen. These women actually enjoyed doing what they did. I do want to tell you as a matter of comfort Then they were both tried after the war, both sentenced to death. And they both did die on the gallows. And one of them, I know, stood there and said, "Hurry up, boys. If you're tough, you're tough." And she was tough. I think the figures that have been publicized, millions of people were killed in the camps. You're going to try and count that. How many are going to be 40 or 50? Now try and count the millions of people being put in camps, into gas chambers, specially designed for the purpose. They were taken into these chambers and told they were going for showers. The doors were shut, and taps were opened, and the gas came in instead of shower water. And people just died standing in those rooms. After the bodies were taken out of those places, anything in the way of gold teeth, gold rings, gold anything valuable was broken off their bodies and used for the German war effort. And the bodies were buried in pits. An unspeakable thing. I will switch to the other concentration camp, Belsen, which I eventually got as well. They had dug pits from the size of this place. The prisoners had to dig the pits, and then they were thrown into the pits, dead or alive, and left, if they were still alive, left to die. I saw the bodies crawling over the dead. And it's an image that hasn't left me. So anyway, I came to Britain, eventually lived with Mr. Reigate and his family for a while. And then I think Mrs. Reigate had enough of me, and I don't blame her. She got me a job on a poultry farm, looking after chickens. And I must tell you, I hate chickens. I can't stand it. And then I had to feed them, and I had to carry the feed up the fields to where the huts were. In those days I had shoulders, I was able to carry it anyway, but chickens, I couldn't wait to get away from them. Except once the farmer had bought some choice cockerels to propagate the species. And I injured one of them, carrying it from one pen to another. And I was so scared. I was scared of everything after Italy. I was scared of, I wouldn't ask a cock for directions, I was so scared. Anyway, I was scared that the farmer would be very angry with me, so I decided to get rid of the corpus delicti. And I thumped it over the head with a hammer. And, well, I learned my cruelty somewhere. I dumped it in an overturned water bucket. And that night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing fire engines and the police and everybody coming after me. The next morning I couldn't wait. I belted down to where that bucket was, and the thing was still alive. Bang, I did it again. That was the end of that cockerel's career. And my poultry farming career. All the time I was in Britain, living it up like that. Things were getting worse and worse in Germany. The war had broken out very fiercely. Italy and Germany allied against the rest of Europe, really, but Italy and Germany were stronger than the rest of them put together. And the war was to begin with going very, very badly for us. I went to live in London, and then I lived through the air raids. You've read about the air raids, the air raid alarms, the all clears. The sound of the alarms was worse than the sound of the bombs. To me, it was a terrifying sound. Imagine you're sitting in peace, and suddenly this penetrating thing goes right through you, and it tells the enemy aircraft overhead to drop bombs on you, your innocent homes, innocent people who've never done anything wrong. And they used to, the British used to hide in air raid shelters, and also in the underground. And when you went home at night, or wherever, you actually walked through the underground with thousands of people lying there, camped out to be safe from the bomb. And you saw the buildings that had been smashed. I remember actually seeing buildings where they, so halfway down, half the building was left standing. It looked like dolls' houses. You still saw some of the furniture, and the other side of the building had gone. And thousands of people died. And I was about 17, 18, 19, I can't remember. And I was living there, and all I wanted to do was join the British Army. And they wouldn't have me because I was a foreigner. I spent my life at your age or thereabouts being a foreigner, being unwanted because I was a foreigner, being unwanted because I was a Jew, being persecuted for all the same reasons, and having my mother stuck in Italy, my brother stuck in jail, my sister in domestic service somewhere, and that was my family. My father cancer was even worse scourge then than it is now, because there was no treatment for it at all. So eventually I managed to get in the army, and they put me in some awful regiment, again because I was a foreigner. They put me in a terrible regiment called the Pioneer Corps. I hope none of you had parents in the Pioneer Corps, grandparents, because it was awful. It was the scum of the scum of the scum of the British Army. Us and the scum. And the guys were mostly, I was telling you, from Glasgow. I hated them. They couldn't read, they couldn't write, they were jailbirds. I was popular, I was made corporal because I could read their letters for them and write back for them. They couldn't read their girlfriend's letters, and you had no idea what was in those letters. I used to read it and read it back and write it back. So life in the army for me was quite comfortable. And then came D-Day, the day when the British and the Americans landed in Europe, when we really turned the war around. Having already won the battles of Alamein in Africa and the battle in Stalingrad in Russia, we really turned the war around. The Americans and the British invaded Europe. And the very day they invaded Europe, I was moved from the Pioneer Corps to the Intelligence Corps, the bright people, because by then I spoke French, Italian, German, and English, obviously. And I was made an interrogator. I'll come back to that in a minute. All the time this was going on, atrocities were being perpetrated more and more. By that time the German army did it as well. For example, the SS, you know, the famous SS with the flashes here and the skull and crossbones and the uniforms. The SS lost their regimental commander in France. It had been hijacked. So the entire SS regiment moved into this little village called Oradour-sur-Glane. It's gone down in history. They moved in, 900 villagers lived there, 900. And the Germans moved in, put all 900 into a church, put machine gunners around the church, and then set fire to the church. All of the people in that building perished, except 2 who got away and took photographs. And because I was in the intelligence corps by then, I got some very secret information. And I saw those photographs when they first came out. Can you imagine? Imagine, these people were put in a church because the commandant of the Nazis had been hijacked. That was one of the many things that happened. I believe that there was a transport of prisoners removed from the Channel Islands, where there were also a lot of camps. They moved to Channel Islands back to Europe for safety reasons, and they were in cattle trucks, standing up and dying, amongst the living. And the Canadians, who were on the other side, fortunately, caught that transport, stopped the train, saw the dead living amongst the living, and just took their guns out and shot the lot. That was Canadian justice, and I can't say I regret that we did it. But imagine this is war, and this is politics, and this is racism. All of this would not have happened, all of it, if Hitler, that lunatic, hadn't decided he had to get rid of his Jews. The Jews who survived in Germany, by the way, a lot of them were sent back to Poland, and that's where all the camps were flourishing as well. People were being killed in the same ways in Auschwitz and in Belgium and Buchenwald, and I could mention dozens more of those camps. Anyway, I was moved to the intelligence corps because of my languages, and I had to interrogate the prisoners of war. They came pouring in their thousands because the Germans were being beaten by then, and they were shipped from France to Britain for interrogation of the sort. We had to find out what they were doing, what they had been doing. It wasn't much, we were just ordinary soldiers. But then I was detached to a special job, which was war crimes interrogation. The war was just ending. And because of my language, I was in charge of a unit of war crimes interrogators. In other words, the people we suspected of real war crimes, the things I've been describing to you, were interrogated by us, and we decided what to do with them. I'll tell you a couple of stories. There I was with my 3 stripes sitting behind the desk, and this German prisoner was brought before me. And I had some letters he'd written, I got the copies of them. And in the letters he'd written, "Dear George," to Germany, he'd written to Germany saying, "Dear George, here in Kutner, that's Lithuania, there is a ghetto. There were 60,000 Jews in it, 60,000. There are only 25,000 left, but don't worry, we go amongst them daily with our rubber truncheons there won't be many left very soon. That idiot wrote that letter to his local party chief in Germany, and I got the letter. I interrogated him, and I tell you this, he aged 20 years in half an hour. I had him standing before me. And I do know that I sentenced him. In those days I had the power to pass sentences. And I sentenced him to 30 years imprisonment. Needless to say, I'm sure he got out after 6 months, because all the baddies got out after a few months. There was one German leading atomic scientist, if you like. He was working on the V2 rocket. Now, the V2 rocket was designed as a weapon against Britain by the Germans. The rockets used to scoosh through the air into Britain, fall into the buildings, blow up everything inside. And he created this thing, and he used slave labor, all these prisoners. He used them as slave labor to do all the odd jobs, and if they didn't have enough to eat, they were left to die, standing or lying, wherever they were. Tens of thousands of these forced laborers were left to die in helping this man called Werner von Braun in developing the rocket. The V2 rocket was called, by the way. Well, after the war, the Americans decided he was going to be very useful to develop the atom bomb. And they took him out of Germany, where he should have been hung on the quarters. They took him to America and made him into a great hero. And he helped develop the atom bomb. That was Mr. Werner von Braun. There were thousands of others who committed these terrible, terrible crimes. And as I said to you before, I went to Belgium and saw what was happening there. And if I hadn't grown up by then, I grew up then. You cannot visualize people, dead or alive, lying in these pits, dug by them. I'd say this of the British Army, they got in there and got the German guards to clean up the whole thing, which was a bit of satisfaction anyway. Another one of my prisoners was a young SS officer. The SS in the army wore black uniforms again, with brown crossbones. And he had been accused of having killed 9 elderly Jews cowering in a cellar, just because they were scared, they had nowhere to go. He was accused of having killed them. He got his gun out, his revolver, and bang, 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 and just to make sure they were dead, he would bang, 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 and left them all for dead. Unfortunately for him, we found out about it, so I got interrogated. And I said, it says here that you killed 9 innocent Jews in a cellar with a gun. He said, no sir, it was only 8. I said, 9. He said, what's 1 Jew more or less? And I said, I hear this, I can hear him, I can still see him. 1 Jew more or less. I thought of my grandparents back in Poland, buried somewhere, for sure. My family disrupted. My father dead in Italy, my brother in jail in Italy. And this guy says, what's 1 Jew more or less? I continued my job for quite a while until it got a bit heavy for me as well, and I got discharged from the army. I keep it short now. My brother received 30 years in prison. 30 years. He had committed a crime, he spied, but 30 years imprisonment. And of course he came out at the end of the war. He was released after 6 years. And he went to live in Brazil. And funny enough, his daughter's coming to visit me in a couple of days. That's another story. And with that family, that side of my family survived, my brother and I. But it had been a very tough time. And then out of the army, I was looking for a job. I couldn't get one anywhere. So my mother, who had remarried and married a Scots guy, my voice going. She married a Scots guy from Ayr. And my mother got in touch with me and said, look, why don't you come to Scotland? Maybe my new husband can find you something to do. So, indeed, he found me something to do, and I got a job as a sort of commercial traveller. Managed to struggle my way through. And I made a friend, a very good friend. He said to me one day, you know, I'm getting engaged. I'd like you to meet my future fiancée. So he took me to his home, to his fiancée's home. And there's fiancée, lovely girl, but sitting over the table at buffet was another very pretty girl doing her German homework. And I helped her with the German homework, and we've been happily married ever since. And that was 58 years ago. And thank you for listening.
Well, I think we're all stunned into silence. I certainly am. Here's Alex with a small gift on behalf of us all.
I get drunk on your phone. Very, very much indeed. And I'm sure you must have some questions asked. A little bit about me.
Very quickly, we have 4 minutes. Anybody got questions?
Yes.
Quickly.
Would you mind standing up? It's easier for me.
You said your sister went praying with. Did you ever meet her? Like after that?
Your sister, did you get together again? with
Yes,
your
oh yes.
sister?
My sister died some years ago, but yes, we got together again, and her children. The family got together again. As I said, my brother went to live in Brazil. We sort of got together again. At the end of the disaster time, we were quite lucky, really, except my father had died, under most abysmal conditions as well. But I want you to remember that what I told you wasn't in Unix, it wasn't fiction, it really happened. People, so-called humans, decimated at least 6 million people because they were Jewish. We could do the same with any other color or breed nowadays with the same excuse because they were whatever. Unspeakable. Just remember Hitler and Mussolini. Yes, ma'am.
You know when they were like interrogating people,
Yes.
did they know, like when they were people that killed Jewish people, did they know you were Jewish, or did you keep that secret?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I wasn't going to discuss me with them. I was the boss. I was simply the war crimes interrogator.
So did the people that employed you to be the interrogated person know you were Jewish, or was that not a problem?
No, that was really not something I discussed. To me, remember, they were scum. All I did talk to them about was interrogation, finding out what they had done, what they had wrong, like that guy in the ghetto in Lithuania, or like the guy with the guns, or the women who peeled human skin off bodies. But it wasn't any of their business whether I was Jewish or not. But I did know, just very quickly, the incredible sensation of being a sergeant in British military intelligence on very secret work, sitting there at my desk with those animals in front of me, having gone full circle, 1933, escaped from Germany, 1945, 12 years later, the boat was on the other foot. Thank you.
Sorry, how many times did you restart school?
A bit louder, I think I'm getting deaf.
How many times did you restart school?
How many times did you restart school? I think
That's
that sounds a
easy,
nightmare to
about
them.
6 or 7 times. and each time I had, like you did, I had to relearn again the local geography, the local history, local customs, local everything, and the languages. Actually, I learned a bit more that way. I'm not quite as stupid as I might have been otherwise.
Any more questions? Yep.
Was everybody like racist towards you in Britain because you were Jewish?
You know, in every country in the world there is what they call anti-Semitism, the hatred of Jews, or the hatred of any other race or color or creed, which is equally unforgivable. But yes, I was told occasionally I was a bloody Jew. Well, not too often. Nowadays it's a thing that's more or less died out. People like you, young people like you, will never carry that kind of thinking into your grown-up generation, never. And remember that. Color or creed or religion shouldn't make any damn difference at all.
Well, I've just got to say, I'm sure you feel the same. It's a great honour that we were the last people to hear Bob's talk. I must say, if I get to his age and look as good, I'll feel very good about it. And I think, again, we'd like to show our appreciation for a marvellous talk.